All right, we'll give everybody one more minute to get in, then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Patrick Botts Forbes. I am the LAFD Community Emergency Response Team Central Bureau Coordinator, and this is our third Wednesday of the month Community Emergency Response Team Continuing Education Training. Tonight's topic is on how asking questions could save your life. And really, where this class came out of is over the last several trainings I've given, we've had very few people at the end of class ask questions. And during our drills, we give briefings and we ask people repeatedly over and over again, are there any questions? Does everybody understand? Is there any confusion? And no one ever pipes up. Nobody ever asks a question. They all seem to understand. And then we see in the drill that there are questions that people did not get, that things that were covered in the briefing, people are lapsed on. They don't seem to be able to do, or they seem to have forgotten. So really what we're asking you to do is to think about questions to ask and then see if you can answer them. And if you can't, or maybe still do ask questions, because if you've got a question, chances are someone else does as well. For those of you who are not yet CERT trained or have not taken the Community Emergency Response Team training, this is in-person training. Now, we welcome people from all over the country, all over the world to these trainings, especially if you're watching this on YouTube later. But if you live in the Los Angeles area, these classes are taught by the fire department. This is training that everyone, in my opinion, should take. It should be taught in high school. It is basic how to use a fire extinguisher, how to do basic first aid, when you should use a fire extinguisher, when should you call the fire department. During a disaster, what are the skills that you need to be able to help your neighbors safely and not put yourself at risk or worse, become a victim? And actually, what they don't tell you that they're teaching you is how to be a leader. It's one thing to say that you are the boss and that you're directing people, giving them orders, barking direction. And it's something else to actually lead a team of people that your job is to keep them safe and guide them along the process so that you can accomplish the mission. A lot of times what happens is we have people who think that they are the most important part when really the leader keeps everyone safe and that's their job. It's not about the glory of being the person in charge. It's about making sure everybody makes it back safely. And so if you haven't yet please sign up for one of these trainings. They're happening all over the city, all over the county of Los Angeles. You can go to cert-la.com/Eventbrite to see the list of trainings. LA County Fire, if you go to lacountyfire.galaxydigital.com/event, you'll see the trainings they have available there as well. One of the issues that we have, one of the difficulties that we have teaching classes is that I have taken a lot of training. I have a fair amount of experience, maybe not as much experience as I would like, but I've been doing this for a little bit now. And when I write training or give a briefing at a drill, I've done it many, many times. And I'm not a robot. I can't regurgitate the exact same briefing, material, everything that I've thought about going into this, writing this presentation ahead of time. A lot of it doesn't make it into the training because I've forgotten it. I forgot to write it down. I forgot when I wanted to put that in there. And then when I go to sit down, I get writer's block. And it, it's it's very difficult to approach from the perspective of someone who is not experienced, who does not have a lot of training. And I would hazard a guess to say that this is a universal issue. If you have, if you are the subject matter expert at something and you try and teach people who have never done this before, you're coming from a perspective where it makes sense to you. And what you say, what you teach makes sense from all the experience and training that you have. But when you're coming from the approach of someone who's never seen this before, never thought about this before, it's really hard to check all the boxes and convey all the points and get across to someone very complicated topics in a way that they're able to digest and understand and retain. And quite frankly, it's really impossible to have a single training that can combine every single piece of training, every single class, every single year of experience that we've had to get to the point where we can confidently teach something and distill it all down in a way that everyone is going to come out being an expert. I would say that's impossible. So the class is always the beginning of the journey, and it's kind of an insight into the bigger subject, the more expansive universe. And any instructor who can say 100% that you will not have any questions at the end of this training is lying to you. And that's why at the end of every single training, they always ask you, are there any questions? But when we don't have people ask questions at the end of the training, it's a question of, did we cover everything? Did we confuse them? Did we overwhelm them? Or did they really get it? And it's usually not the latter. From your perspective as a student, it's difficult to take a class, especially as an adult. I would say being an adult learner is even more difficult than being a student at times, a younger student anyway, if you're in high school or elementary, because you have a lot of things going on in your brain, in your day, your relationships, your work, your social life, your other trainings you're taking. If you're taking multiple classes, you're balancing everything. And it's really important to understand that everyone learns differently and everyone's brain works differently. that you're sitting next to other people in a class and being taught the same material doesn't mean that they're all learning the same way you are. They're all absorbing it the same way you are. There's multiple ways to convey. There's visual, there's physical, there's audio, there's even scents and smells. There's humor, there's um, every instructor is different because they've learned to teach differently. And that's what makes it important to be able to experience subjects from different instructors. You can have the same material taught by 5 different instructors and the exact same material taught, and you're going to learn something different from each one. But also bear in mind that you might be coming in as a novice, but the person next to you might have 20 years of experience doing this, and they're required to take this class to check a box. And especially if you're surrounded by people who are experts and they're all not paying attention to the class, you need to focus on yourself. You need to make sure you learn the material because you want to be there versus the people who have to be there, if that makes sense. Again, I'm going to re-emphasize the point that it is nearly impossible for any trainer, any educator to convey every single point and answer every single question that all students have. And I want to reemphasize that if you have a question, chances are someone else does as well. So keep that in mind. Now, when we start talking about asking questions, it's really important to understand why you would ask a question. When you think about what question should I ask as you're listening to the material, or more likely, do I understand the material? What questions do I have? And you're actually saying to yourself, I want to ask a question. I need to process the information being given to me, conveyed to me, taught to me. And I need to come up with a question that I can ask. You're forcing your brain to process that information differently than if you were just sitting there passively and listening with no intent to ask any questions. You're going to probably remember more of that class if you're actively thinking, what questions can I ask so I can better understand this, than someone who's sitting there without even thinking about, do I understand this? And they're going to get up and walk out of the class and forget 95% of what was just taught in that class within minutes. And that's really why you're here. If you are taking a class, you want to be able to use it in the future. So you need to force your brain to understand the material, process the material. And by forcing yourself to say, I will ask a question at the end of this class, now I need to come up with a question that makes sense, that is not only going to help me, but help other people. I need to retain this information later. And I think that is a good thing, good way to accomplish that goal. So one of the things we see in our drills, or one of the skills that we want everyone to do, is develop critical thinking skills. We're going to throw a problem at you. And there's a couple things here. We're trying to be as realistic as possible. Any training can give you a very obvious problem with an obvious solution that all you have to do is refer to the manual and it tells you exactly what to do. But that's not real life. We want you to encounter something and think, what's wrong here? What is the problem? That's step number one. figure out what the problem is. Step number two, then, once you identify what the problem is how do I fix the problem? And I approach this from my full-time career. I am a IT systems engineer. When I encounter something that's strange, it, it it's not even necessarily a problem yet. Something doesn't feel right. Something is off. Something's unusual. Or maybe it is literally a big warning sign that's saying something is wrong. The great one from Microsoft is something went wrong. Contact your system administrator. Thanks, Microsoft. That is the most useful error message that you could have possibly given us. Now it really is, well, what is the problem? It literally says something went wrong. Well, what is something? What went wrong? So that critical thinking, that starting to ask questions, what's wrong? Is it just an error message? Is something actually broken? Do I see a symptom? In the medical training that you get, if you take some more advanced medical training, you understand that there are signs and symptoms. A sign is something you can see. It is bleeding. It is a bruise. It is someone screaming in pain and writhing on the floor. It is something very obvious. A symptom is something you can't see. Um, and the sign might be that someone has bruising on their abdomen. Wow, that's a difficult word to say. On their stomach or on their belly. The symptom could be that um, hmm, I didn't think this one through. The symptom could be they're feeling nauseated. They're feeling sick to their stomach. Why, what is the commonality, the sign and the symptom? How does that go together to figure out what's wrong with this person? Something's clearly wrong. And when you come from the IT perspective, well, I get this message that says something went wrong, but is there an actual problem? Can I ignore this sign that's telling me something went wrong? Or do I need to find out what the actual problem is? And I will tell you, when you open a ticket with Microsoft, they ask you to scope it. They say, okay, you're getting this message that says something went wrong. Contact your system administrator. If we make that message go away, does that close the ticket? And if the ticket cost you $2,000 to open in the first place, and they make that message go away, but it didn't solve your problem, you learn very quickly you only make that mistake once. You don't want to keep your questions too narrow. You don't want to focus on one thing that is too specific because you may make that message go away, but you didn't solve the problem. And you might not realize even what the real problem is. All you know is you got this message that said something went wrong, contact your system administrator. And if you deal with someone who's injured and the sign is that they have scrapes on their arms and they're in pain, and you bandage up the scrapes on their arms, but you didn't go deeper. You didn't say, well, why did they get the scrapes on their arms? What happened leading up to this? Well, they fell. Okay. Why did they fall? Well, um, they tripped on something, I think. Why did they trip on something? Well, they got a little dizzy and stumbled and then tripped on something. Okay, well, why did they get dizzy? You see how as you start asking questions, you start to narrow in on this isn't someone who tripped and fell and scraped their arms. This person has possibly something that is medically wrong with them that bandaging their arms is not going to solve. And so we really want you to figure out what the real problem is. Don't just look at the signs and symptoms. Dig deeper. Ask more questions. And this is not a political this is not to be political at all, but we have an election coming up. And I don't know if you're listening to the radio or watching TV, but or probably just being online in general. They're bombarding you with very targeted attack ads. And they are saying things to get you to vote in a way that they want you to vote. And so it is imperative that you start developing the critical thinking of who is telling me to vote and why. And when you're being manipulated by an ad, what is the reason for that? What are they saying? And more importantly, what are they not saying? And this goes both directions. I can't, I quite frankly have no idea at any point in time as I'm watching TV who's advertising to me because they're not saying it. They're not saying vote Democrat, vote Republican, vote independent. They're saying so and so is evil and you need to vote them out of office. Well, that is vague and possibly not even true. So you really need to start developing this critical thinking. Start figure out what the problem is and figure out how to solve the problem, fix the problem. So, as I mentioned, over the last several months and several drills, why are we not getting people asking questions? Well, it comes down to it. If I'm sitting in a class surrounded by people and no one else, and I have a question, and no one else is asking questions. The instructor says, "Any questions?" And everybody get it? Understand? Is this clear as mud? And everyone nods their head. Well, I don't want to be the only one who sticks up my hand and says, I have a question. I don't understand anything you just said. Because I think that everyone else got it. It's clearly a problem that I have, not a problem with the instructor. Again, I might be surrounded by people who are forced to take this class and are not paying attention in class. Maybe they're experts at it, or maybe they don't care. This is not something that they care about. But now imagine that everyone has the same question. The instructor said something. I have no idea what that means. Again, going back from the instructor point of view, I have years of experience, years of trainings I've taken. I wrote the material. I think it's very clear to me what I am saying. But is it clear to the students what I am saying? And that's why sometimes you need to be the person who asks the question. And I did this in a coordinator meeting. Our one of our previous captains is a PIO, public information officer. He has a way with words. He has a way of stringing words together, and this is that thing that he probably didn't realize he did this. He said something that sounded great, and everybody nodded and seemed to, get it. And I thought about it and went, "What did he just say?" He put together words and they sounded good, but I don't understand what they mean. And so I asked the question, but what does that mean? And to him, he got it. He understood what it meant because he's the one who said it. And he looks at me, and I talked to him later about this, and going through his mind is, what? What do you mean? What does this mean? Who are you to ask me that question? But we get so used to it as being instructors that we assume that we know what we're talking about and we're conveying it in a way that everyone else knows what we're talking about. But in reality, we're putting words together. It sounds great, but doesn't mean anything. And you really need to start digging down into what is this person trying to say? But nobody wants to be the one person who doesn't seem to get it. Nobody wants to be the person who asks too many questions. Think about it if you experienced children before and they're always asking questions. Why? 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 You give them an answer, why? And it might be because they're trying to annoy you, but it might be because they're trying to learn and you're not giving them an answer. You're dancing around with pretty words that mean nothing, and this child is trying to actually figure out what you're trying to say. And from your perspective, you think you know what you're saying, and the child should as well. But the reality is that you're not saying what you think you are. The other complication is if you're in a large group, it is extremely hard to be that one person who stands up and raises their hand and says, I didn't get it. Can you please say that again? Can you explain what you mean? And we see that in when we break out in smaller groups, smaller teams, that um, it's easier to ask a question in front of 3 or 4 other people than it is to answer a question in front of 50 people. But guarantee you're not the only one who has that question. So I advocate that you be brave. You ask the question. So I have an assignment for you. As we go through this presentation, I want you to think of a question to ask at the end of this presentation. I want you to process the information I'm giving you, to think about what I'm saying, and at the end, ask a question that's meaningful to you because you don't understand or you want clarification. Now, a lot of times what happens is, and this is why we ask people to hold the questions until the end, is the next slide may actually tell you the answer. And that's great if it does, because it means you're actively thinking, like, okay, if this, then this, but why this? And on the next slide, you get the answer to that. So if at the end you've already answered your questions, tell us this. Say, hey, this is what I was asked. The question I came up with earlier in the training, and then you answered it with this. That helps your brain retain that information. But if I don't answer the question, then at the end, ask your question. And there's only 36 of you on here. So it's not 50 people. It's not 150 people. So don't be intimidated by the group. Again, don't be afraid to ask questions. Asking questions is how you retain knowledge. Asking questions is how you build critical thinking skills. Asking questions is how you force your brain, however old it is, be it 10 years old, 5 years old, 50 years old, 105 years old, it, it remaps the surface of your brain. It builds new synapses. If you stop asking questions, well, are you even alive at that point? And probably actually one of the scariest things is you probably want your leader, the instructor, to know everything. You're taking a class and you want a subject matter expert to teach you that material. And I can tell you, it is impossible to know something and have the answer to all the questions. And if you come up with a great question, your instructor shouldn't feel challenged by it. Your instructor should welcome it. And your instructor should say, be willing to admit, I don't know the answer to that. Let me research it and get back to you. If you ask an instructor or someone who's teaching you something or trying to teach you something and they get mad at you for asking a question, question them. Who is this instructor that they're getting mad at me for asking a question? Because chances are they don't know the answer and they don't want to admit they don't know the answer. And there's problems there. And this is why you need to start asking questions, not just about the material, but also about the instructor. Don't just ask the first question that pops in your head, though. Think about it for yourself. What is this? What does this mean? Think about it. What is this person trying to tell me? Think about it. If you can process it and process the information to answer your own question, you're going to learn the material better. If you just ask the question outright, well, maybe it was something simple. And I don't want to say that there are no dumb questions, but there are questions that were answered and you didn't listen. There, we've had classes where we told everyone, you have to read the material. You're paying for this class, this emergency medical responder class. You're paying a lot of money for it. You need to read the book or you will fail the class. And you can tell when someone didn't read the book when they ask questions that you read the book and they're asking a question that was answered in the book. And it's not that they had questions about the answer in the book. It is clear that they did not read the book. And that hurts everyone. So challenge yourself to think about questions, ask them to yourselves, and come up with the answer before you ask the question out loud. Now, here's the other thing is that sometimes people will try and trump you with a question they think they know the answer to. And we see this all the time when people are being persuasive or attempting to be. Well, if so and so has this great plan, why didn't do they do this before? Again, try not to get political here. It can be asked on both sides. But you're not asking the question to get an answer. You're trying to trump the person. And that's not a good reason to ask questions. But sometimes you think you know the answer to something and you're trying to wave it in someone's face, and they come back with, well, because of this. This is what happened, and this is what we're trying to do differently. This is what we learned when it didn't work the first time. And now we're going to approach it from a different avenue and come in this way. And if you're trying to trump someone, well, that's probably not the best word to say. If you're trying to um, present yourself as smarter, that you have a point and they come back with an answer that you don't accept, it's hard to recover from that if you're not willing to accept it. You need to be open to it because maybe they have a real good answer and that can change your frame of mind if you're open to it. And you should always be open to it. We're here to learn, we're here to better ourselves. You're taking this training because you want to learn more, you want to better yourself. And so you need to be open to answers you didn't expect and be willing to explore that. And finally, don't be an asshole. If you're asking the question for the purpose of asking the question, are you trying to learn something from it, or are you just trying to check a box? Are you trying to say, well, maybe the instructor doesn't actually know what they're doing, so I'm just going to ask questions until they rage quit. I'm trying to break them. Um, that's not the purpose of learning. Um, I very I'm very cautious about memes because a lot of times they oversimplify a point, but I thought this was a good one. We've all seen this particular viral thing, and they have different variations of this, but um, it's easy to get distracted by a simple answer that's false when the complicated answer that's true is is way more than you want to deal with. It is, I can do A and B, and that answers my question, but it's really A, 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, plus B, B.1, B.2, B.3, plus C, D, E, and F. And it's much more complicated than, oh yeah, it's just this. Um, but sometimes there are simple answers to stuff, and it's it's a balancing act. Um, Problems are usually a lot more complicated than they seem, and the vast majority of us want a simple answer for a complicated problem. Homelessness. Well, if we get people off the street, they won't be homeless. Well, that's great, except it's a lot more complicated than that. It's not as simple as putting a roof over someone's head. There are massive issues that need to be addressed to fix a complicated problem. But people look to politicians and say, well, I want you to give me your answer to this complicated problem in a soundbite. I want you to have the solution. I want you to fix my problems, my concerns. And then you have politicians who come along and give that simple answer. Say, I have the solution to your problem. All we have to do is this, and I can make it happen. I want you to be cautious about anyone who says that. If they say, oh, I can snap my fingers. If you elect me, I'll snap my fingers and I'll fix all of your problems. Now you need to start asking questions. Because I guarantee as soon as you start asking questions, you're going to start poking holes in this person's plan, this simple solution. And um, if they start getting mad at you for asking these questions, you've started to poke holes in them. And now you have to question if is this the person you want to follow? Is this the leader you want to follow? Because no one who's teaching you or leading you should get mad at you for asking legitimate questions. They do, question who you're following, question who's telling you to follow them. So, I mean, we've all heard this. Questions to ask: why, how, who, what, where, when. Pretty simple. But you have to ask the questions correctly. Start by asking yourself, why are you here? It's it's not going to be a simple answer, I would hope. I mean, you might start off with a simple answer. I was bored, I had nothing else to do. Or I've taken all of his trainings. Or I want to be a better person. But start asking your questions, but why? But why? But why? Because we're not simple creatures. We don't have simple motives. Why are you here is not as simple as because I want to be. Find your motives as deep as they are and really explore them. Because once you understand your motives for being here, you can start targeting what do you want to learn or how do you learn. Is if you're here to train and get knowledge, everyone learns differently. So how do you learn? If I teach one way and you don't learn well in that way, then you need to start figuring out, well, how can I learn the material better when the instructor is not teaching me in the way that I need to learn better? And maybe that is asking the question, well, if I need to ask a question in a way that makes me understand it better, then is that going to help me learn this better? So understand who you are and how you learn, and you'll come up come away from the material a lot better. hopefully. Who is this training for? Well, I call this continuing education training. We say it's open to everyone, but is this just for CERT members? Is this for people who have taken 15 classes, a bunch of ICS courses, they're firefighters, or they want to be firefighters, they're ex-military? Is this for you? Is this training geared towards what you want to learn and what you want to be? Because if it's not, it's going to change the frame of what you're learning out of this class. If this is a very basic class and you've been to 15 of these, are you going to get the same thing out of it that you would have if you were a novice? But maybe, how does this person teach the material? If I want to teach my team this material, can I learn more from teaching it in a similar way that this instructor is teaching it? And I can guarantee you, if you teach something, you're going to learn as much from teaching, from that process of teaching it, as you are from actually taking the class. And there's only so much training you can take yourself before you max out. And you need to start putting things in your own words and sharing it with your neighbors, with your teammates, because you're going to learn a lot more doing that than you are from just taking classes all the time. What are the qualifications of your instructor? Well, you hope that your instructor is a subject matter expert. But I can tell you, a lot of times, people can teach a lot of things and not be experts at it. PowerPoint presentation, a book that they read, they can tell you a lot of things that the course material that someone else wrote tells them to tell you. But when you start asking them questions, they can't answer the questions because they don't know the material that in depth. They are not a subject matter expert. They are a good instructor. Again, it goes back to, that's a great question. Let me research it and get back to you. That tells you your instructor wants you to learn it and cares about you as a student, but also cares about the material. Where will I use this training? Goes back to motive, but it's purpose too. If I am never going to put this training into action, into use, I will never use this in my life. What is the purpose of me taking this training? And am I going to pay attention to this? Am I going to care about the material being taught to me? Am I looking to check a box? I don't need to know about this, but I'm here because I want to have a certificate that says, a piece of paper that says, I took this class. It goes back to motive, but also how well are you invested in it? How well do you want to learn? Are you going to ask good questions if you don't care about the material? Um, be careful about this one, but it is relevant. You should always understand yourself better. And if you understand yourself well, better, your motives, your ambitions, your goals, then you can make the most about the questions so you can learn the material better. When will I use this training? The answer is never. Um, it's probably not the training you need at this point. Now, the thing is, sometimes you may never know when you're going to use this. It could be, well, when is there going to be a massive earthquake in Southern California? If the scientists are saying sometime in the next 20 to 200 years, I might not be alive in 200 years, so I may never need this training. But if it's tomorrow, I need to be an expert on it now. It's in 20 years, I have time to learn and become better at my skills. Now, you understand yourself better, understand your motivations better, how you learn. Understand the motives of the instructor teaching you or the person telling you something. Goes back to, sounds great, but what are they saying? Why are they telling me this? Every interaction you have with someone is a manipulation. Whether you're manipulating them or they're manipulating you, every time you interact, you are both equally trying to manipulate. Now, if you are trying to learn something and you're trying to manipulate the instructor into teaching you something, and they are trying to get you to do something that's not safe, or they have ulterior motives, you need to suss that out. You need to find out, why is this person telling me this? Because maybe they don't have my best wishes at heart. Maybe they are trying to get me to do something for their benefit and not for my own. How does this apply to me? Well, if they're trying to manipulate you and they're trying to scare you, they're manipulating your emotions on a fear that may not actually apply to you. They're trying to scare you for something that is not reality. You need to start understanding what this manipulation is, and does it really apply to me, or how does it apply to me? If the chances of me dying in a tornado is almost nothing because I don't go into areas that have tornadoes, then why are they trying to scare me about getting a tornado shelter? I'm being vague intentionally, but I'm trying to make a point. You need to understand, and it's not just politics, but sales too. A lot of bomb shelters were sold during the height of the Cold War. Were they ever used as a bomb shelter? No. But did somebody make a lot of money on it? Oh, yeah. Why is this person trying to manipulate me? And are they trying to scare me and convince me of something that's not reality? Who do they think they're talking to? Well, again, every interaction is a manipulation, for better or for worse, or, maybe they think you're not trained. They're trying to convince you to get trained, and they think they're talking to someone who, and they're aiming their manipulation at the wrong person. Well, maybe you can fix that. You can have a better conversation if you say, "Oh, but I've taken this training already, and I'm the only one here. So let's have a better discussion and actually get more in depth and actually talk about what I want to learn from you as someone who might be a subject matter expert, but doesn't understand who they're talking to, who their audience is." Don't be afraid to make that question and change the scope of the discussion. If I'm teaching a class and everyone's done this already, it's a waste of my time and everyone else's time to keep talking about something that everybody already knows. I can change the subject, I can change the topic, I can make it more relevant to everyone in the room, but I need to know who my audience is. I need to know who I'm talking to. And if you're on the receiving end of that, don't be afraid to stand up and say, "But we already know this. Let's talk about something more interesting." This goes back to that statement. I don't even remember what it was, but it was a lot of pretty language, sounded great, but what do they really mean? Um, this goes to really to the core of trying to ask questions to yourself. You're trying to figure out, what is this person saying? They're saying stuff. Now, it might be they're trying to scare me into something. They're trying to manipulate me to do something they want me to do. But the words they are saying don't mean anything. I start asking questions to myself, but to them, and they get defensive about it. Start poking holes in what they're saying, asking them to elaborate about something, and they can't give me details. Now I know the kind of person I'm talking to. Where are they going with this? Well, this goes to the heart of that manipulation. They're trying to get me to do something. Now, could be buy a bomb shelter, buy first aid equipment, buy supplies so that I'm prepared for an earthquake. But I need to know what the purpose they have for having this conversation with me, this training with me, this class. What did they want me to do? Where are they going with this? And that's something I should be asking myself as I'm listening to this person talk and tell me stuff. When is too much? A lot of times, someone will overwhelm you with information intentionally. They're going to scare you. They're going to talk a lot of pretty words and make it sound like they know what they're talking about and convince you that you don't, that they know they are subject matter expert. They know everything and you need to listen to them. And you need to be able to key in on that. They're saying too much, too loudly, too overwhelmingly. They're trying to manipulate my emotions, and I need to disengage. Because if I don't, I might get sucked in. I might think my emotions are being manipulated by them and I'm falling for it. And I'm now prey to whatever goal they have. If you start to sense that happening, walk away, disengage, get out of there. If they have a problem with you doing that, it only pushes you farther to know that this person does not have my best interests at heart. And in the end, there's a lot of people who are dead because they listened to someone who had bad intentions, convinced them that they were a subject matter expert or leader or someone they should follow, and they ended up literally drinking the Kool-Aid. And the leader didn't. And the leader's now in prison, bunch of dead followers. So you need to start asking yourself questions because you need to know, is this person legit? Does this person know what they're talking about? Or am I in danger? Again, if you're joining us late and you have not taken the Community Emergency Response Team training, these are free trainings taught by the fire department. The goal is to teach you how to be prepared for an emergency, but more so, how to live your life a little bit better prepared. Because we will all encounter emergencies, we will all encounter disasters through our life. And if we're better trained, better prepared for it, we're going to survive. We're going to recover faster from that disaster and emergency than if we weren't prepared and we were surprised by it and possibly lose our life to it. So, I gave you an assignment earlier. Come up with a question to ask. And if you answered that question already, share what you learned. So, who's brave enough to ask the first question?
You want a question asked, or you want me to share what I got out of this training?
Yes. whatever. I want you to interact. I want you to, if you thought about something and then answered or got something out of this, share that. If
All
you have
right.
a
How you
question,
doing, Patrick?
I'm doing well.
What I got out of this for your wrap up at the end was do not get sucked up by too much information by individuals trying to persuade you to go their way. If you at the end of the day, if you know your information and you know what you're supposed to do and what they're telling you don't sound right and you know it's not right, don't follow them.
Absolutely.
Don't lead yourself to death.
Yeah. That in a nutshell. Um, Thank you.
You're welcome.
Patty.
There we are. Can I ask one off topic?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, since you're also an EMT, um, in the floor watch that Chin put out, apparently deceased in triage is now being labeled expectant.
Hmm.
When, why, how?
So black tag means that you expect someone to not survive. And it is a waste of resources to try and save this person. Now, it may be very obvious you encounter someone and they have, there is no pulse, their body's cold, they're not breathing, they're not responsive, clearly dead, or decapitation, something very obviously dead. You may also encounter someone, and this is a terrifying idea, but you encounter someone who has a giant hole in their chest and they're still breathing and they're still talking. But there's literally nothing you can do short of getting them to an OR right now. It's going to save their life. And in a disaster, you might not have that luxury. It is also highly likely or possible that there is nothing that the OR can do. Someone has sustained an injury so severe and traumatizing that they are expected or expectant
Okay.
to decease. And there's nothing you can do about it. So that begins to ask the question, how many resources do I throw at this person that could be used to save someone else's life, who I can save? Am I going to throw at this person who will die no matter what I do? Can't do anything to save this person. It is not something that any of us want to think about, but it is reality, unfortunately. And hopefully no one encounters that, because that is the worst possible scenario that you can experience on a medical.
Mm.
Does that
So,
answer your question, Patty?
yes and no. Yes, for the most part. But
Mhm.
when did they make this change? Was it fairly recently?
I honestly don't know the answer to that.
Oh, okay.
I don't know even in
But
the
it
course
makes more sense.
material, but um, yeah, expectant is a possibility.
And it seems like it would keep us from having to make that judgment since we're not doctors and we cannot pronounce people anyway.
Correct.
So thank you.
You're welcome. Pat Bates.
Hi, Patrick.
Hi.
I was supposed to be Patrick, but I'm not. Uh, anyhow, um, you know, what really resonated with me tonight was I got today about 7 phishing attempts on email. I'm the treasurer of multiple organizations. I get constant emails asking for me to go out and buy gift cards.
Mm,
Um, I do remembering Northridge earthquake very well. I know the cockroaches were out right off the bat, vending everything you didn't want and didn't need. So I think that everything you have told us is a really good, um, it's a good lesson in evaluating with a grain of salt everything you're told But when we have the 7.2 earthquake here in Encino, who do we pay attention to?
Yeah, absolutely. And more importantly, who do you keep an eye on? Because you know they're up to no good.
Yep.
Thanks, Pat.
You're welcome.
All right, Daryl and Phyllis.
Yes. Excuse the eye patch. I just had eye surgery today. So, our question, both of us are teachers. And so our question, we actually came up independently of each other. And that is, how does a teacher get a silent audience to ask or learn to ask?
Hmm.
Hmm.
I don't have a good answer for that. I wrote an entire presentation on that. Interaction. You need to understand your audience. And it's two different things. If you're running a once in a month drill, you're going to have different people every single time. If you have a class that is a semester long or a quarter long, you can develop the rapport with them and you can understand who your audience is. One of the trainings I took by CSTI, the California Specialty Training Institute, said it's the interaction. Me shoving information down your throat is not how people are going to learn. Asking people to teach themselves and each other. And it's again understanding your audience. Well, if I have a bunch of subject matter experts in the room and I get them to start doing projects, interactions, working as teams, coming up and presenting, asking them questions and forcing them to answer, then people are going to learn more from their colleagues or their fellow students than they will from me. And the class can teach itself. And I don't know if I buy that entirely, but that's what basically the gist of that class. And so target people in the class, and that sounds bad, but especially the ones that you know are not necessarily paying attention or not likely to raise their hand and answer. Walk up to them and ask them a pointed question. It's that interaction that's going to get them to start engaging. Now, you also have to be aware of anyone with, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but everyone learns differently and everyone has different limitations. And there will be some people who just will not interact. And you need to be very careful about accidentally forcing them into a bad position that they are simply not capable currently of doing, if that makes sense. Trying to dance around it so I don't come off saying the wrong thing, but
Yep,
you got to understand who your audience is.
yep.
Does that
Okay.
help at
Thank,
all? Daryl, does that help at all?
thank you very much. Yes, it helps. We're both longtime teachers and sometimes we run into people in a big classroom where you have to try to reach the people at the back,
Yeah.
or you sometimes
And
have to go wading into the group to to one way or the other to try to make them feel more comfortable. Sometimes what I've done is I've started a class by saying, you can ask any question you want. Well, you can be in a cert class, you might have to be a little more directed about that, or you might just not. You might just say, why are you here? What do you want to learn?
yeah. And one of the worst things you could do is marry yourself to a podium and never move away from it. walking into the crowd, into the class, getting people to move around and watch you. It's going to help you engage them better and keep them awake, really.
Yeah, and also CERT training is really effective when people actually have to do something like
Yeah.
hold a fire extinguisher or grab a pole or wood or whatever and actually pretend that they're rescuing somebody or trying to deal with an emergency.
Mhm. Absolutely. Thanks, Darrell. Sue Ellen.
Hi, Patrick. This
Hi.
isn't so much a question as it is kudos. Because of your classes and teaching us to think critically, I recently took FEMA 800, where they take an entire one sentence is a paragraph. And I had to stop and ask, what are they trying to tell me? How does this match with what was before it? And I passed, but I had to stop and think, what are they saying? Your training helped with that. Thank you very much.
I'm glad you passed. Thank you, Sue Ellen. And I hope you're having a long plan for your trainings here because we need to start building teams and we need good leaders.
Well, that's something that has been very slow in coming,
Mhm.
is getting people off their duff to take the training or to come to meetings or even to get together has been a very time-consuming, effort-consuming, frustrating situation.
Yeah, it's absolutely a marathon, not a race.
Definitely. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue Ellen. Rick.
Okay, finally got the right button.
There you go.
Uh, I can kind of, just a comment. Sue Ellen's comment on the ICS stuff is dead on. That really makes you think. It exercises the mind in a way that was really quite stimulating when I took 800 and similar ones. But the reason that I had my hand up is going back to the original concept of a question.
Mhm.
My question was, how can one identify the difference between self-serving, egotistical instructor pontificators and those who are trying to sincerely educe or bring out in the student the learning experience? And you answered that quite well, I thought, towards the tail end in the segment in which the concept of manipulation on both the instructor and the student's part is evaluated and you followed up in that with the where are they going with this, again a look into motives of students as well as the instructor, and it comes down to that underlying concept that I got from this entire presentation from beginning to end. It comes down to critical thinking, which is the underlying theme that I see throughout the presentation this evening. Is okay, I just repeated myself redundantly all over again. But that was the whole thing. Thank you. It was a very, very good program.
Thank you. I'm glad. I hope this serves everyone in their life because everyone is trying to manipulate you for better or for worse. Again, just because manipulation has a negative connotation doesn't mean that it is negative all the time. But also, we have to understand our own manipulations. When we interact with people, what are our motives and how are we manipulating the world around us? And I think that's really what makes us humans. I mean, manipulation, it's making the world um, how we want it to be, again, for better or for worse. Phyllis.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. There you go.
Okay. So just a reminder, to add on to what Darrell said, both of us do what we can in our classes to have people learn by doing. And so I just want to remind everybody about the Great Shakeout at 10:17 tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have the Shake Alert app, or the my Shake has been several names in this thing. Is it MyShake?
That's one of them.
Yeah. So the MyShake app, which is from Berkeley, is supposed to alarm at 10:10,
1017.
10:17 in the morning, letting you know that, drop, cover, and hold. And hopefully wherever you are, if it's at home or even if you're driving and you can, safely, maybe not on a freeway, but pull over, because if there was an earthquake, it's very dangerous to keep driving. But if you're at work and you can talk to your colleagues or your bosses, or if you are one of the bosses, treat it seriously. We have been getting a lot of smaller quakes lately, way more than we have in the past 20 years, and we just don't know. And we brush it off as, oh, that's a truck driving by. And I say that jokingly. But the reality is that, okay, where am I right now? What can I get under? Because what if this isn't a truck driving by? This is the big one. I need to be aware of my surroundings and have a plan for what I'm going to do. Because if it turns out to be the big one, and I'm not in a place that I can take shelter, duck, cover, and hold, what am I going to do? Did I pass something recently that I can now go back to? Or do I need to move forward and try and find something that can protect me in the worst possible scenario? Thanks, Phyllis. Melvin. Melvin, you had your hand up. Did you?
Oh, thank you, Patrick. I'm on the East Coast, and our basic training is given quarterly, but that's because of budgetary constraints. We can only do it on a quarterly. So we started training in-house, train the trainers, and train the trainers are training the trainers. And we're going to start doing monthly training sessions. And one of my questions that I had is, how do we get people to interact and ask questions? Because a lot of the time it's not something hands-on. They kind of glaze over halfway through the session. So I was thinking of ways to get more interaction by questions or just interactions by the people in the class, and hopefully get them more interested in joining a CERT team themselves. And this has been very, very instrumental in helping me understand some of the things that I need to do and my fellow trainers need to do to bring the students out of their complacency and have them ask questions, because we know there's tons of questions they'll ask or could ask. So this has been very, very informative and very helpful, both in your presentation and the questions and answers that are given in the afterthoughts here. So it's very good. Yes.
Yeah. And I'll tell you from experience, Zoom and in person are two different things. It's so much harder when someone can turn off their camera and mute themselves to interact with them, because you don't know if they're even there listening. They might be eating or watching TV or something and just here and present, just pretending to be part of the class, versus you can look them in the eye and you can walk up to them and you can ask them a question, or you can put them in a group and force them to interact at a group level. And like I said, we do see in smaller groups, people are more willing to be vocal and ask questions. It's when they're in the larger group that they tend to not want to. So good luck with that. Let me know how it goes.
I will. Thank you.
I hope you can get that program going and start getting your teams built.
Sure.
Chin, my friend.
Hello, how are you? That's my question for the night. But You
been a
don't
long
have
day.
to answer. Hey, you and me both. But a couple things here that I wanted to kind of kick into the discussion. And I've been thinking about a number of things since the presentation began. For me, like you, Patrick, I've been doing this a while and everything like that. First thing I want to let everybody know here is I know people freeze up when they want to ask questions, but again, going back to the most basic concept, as Patrick said, if you have a question, no matter what that question is, I guarantee you that 20 other people in the room have it. And everybody's sitting there waiting for somebody to answer the question. Don't feel bad. Ask that question. I guarantee you those other 19 people will thank you for it. Even maybe quietly, but they're thanking you for it. So, and no question in our world is a stupid question. You know, it's like, don't think it's silly or anything like that. If you don't know, ask. Again, a life can depend on it. Now, a couple different concepts here. For example, um, if you are a little bit leery about asking a question in a class or something like that, and let's say you have the lucky nature of knowing what that question is before you even get to the exercise, reach out. I say that because here in Los Angeles, I think everybody in the world here has my email and my phone number. You know, the billions of emails I send out, the newsletter and everything. You know, I have to quote a little bit of Star Trek in here, and you know I was going to sneak that in. But remember when the Guardian of Forever in the classic episode City on the Edge of Forever said, you know, since your sun burned bright in the stars, I have awaited a question. As a coordinator myself, I will tell you, I'm always awaiting a question. And I get very few questions from our members. Although, like Patrick, I'm out there at those exercises and I can see the wheels are turning and that people want to ask questions or there's something they don't understand. If you are not comfortable doing that in a large environment, like you know during that exercise morning or whatever it is, and you know it beforehand, free to reach out to any of us and ask us what that question is. That is what we are here for. And for everybody around the country, if you are part of some kind of CERT program, big or small or something like that, you have some leaders out there. Find those people in that group who can answer your question. And I know, trust me, I know. Sometimes you can't ask your coordinators, and sometimes you'll get answers that make your eyes shoot back in your head. Kind of find around and try to see who can answer that question. So that's one thing. Reach out to us, you know, during those times when you can just sit and think about the idea. I love it. I get them from time to time, but not nearly as much as I want to get. And two, and I don't think I can remember what two is, but that is actually the most important thing. Ask us a question. Oh, and the second part of that kind of relates to what I just said. Get to know the leadership of your CERT team. Once you get to know those people, if you have a question, you will know exactly who to go to. If I have a medical question, I'm going to Patrick. I'm going to Patrick and maybe some of the other EMTs in the group. If I have a question about search and rescue or something like that, I might go to Tom Worth or somebody else who I know has that experience. So connect. When you're connected with the group, it is far less daunting to ask questions. And always feel free to reach out to any of your, and this should be true for all the leaders. Maybe I'm speaking for everybody and people don't like it, but that's what we're here for. We're here to answer your questions. And I think that sometimes gets very lost. So those are just two or three things I wanted to throw into the mix, Patrick.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just thinking about one good technique to get over the fear that you're going to ask a stupid question is approach it like this. I think I know the answer to this, but can you explain this again? Or can you go more in depth into this? You're not admitting that you're you missed the point entirely. But it allows you to still ask the question and get the instructor to clarify what they meant about something. I think I know the answer to this, but can you go more in depth in this? And hopefully that can be a useful technique to get you out of your shell and actually start asking the questions that you're burning inside you, but you're afraid to ask out loud. So, any other questions, comments, editorials, things you learned from this training that you'd like to re-emphasize to the group? Then, great shakeout tomorrow. If you are in the LA area, our Sherman Oaks drill is on October 26th. It's up at the CERT calendar, cert-la.com. Come on out, participate. We do this monthly, and it is a great time for you to get your hands, not hands dirty, but actually see what you learned in the CERT class actually implemented in a real neighborhood. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Patrick, there was something
Thank
in
you.
the drill that was not answered in the chat.
What was that?
Georgia Brewer said, how do you overcome that being frozen with overwhelming?
Oh, okay, yeah. So everyone's different. Overwhelming, you don't know what is going to overwhelm you, what's going to cause you to freeze. Working in a team, you need to be willing to, and I'll let Patty weigh in on this as well, but be willing to trust your team to bump you out if you need to. And this is taught in first aid as in CPR when you're working on someone who's in cardiac arrest and someone locks up, someone needs to step up, bump the person out, take over that role, and give the person an opportunity to recover and step back in. And there's absolutely no shaming. There's absolutely no negativity about it because we each have something that will trigger us in a way we did not expect because we haven't seen it yet that will cause us to lock up and freeze. Patty?
Exactly right. When I was teaching the first aid and stuff, when I was doing triage classes, if before people went into my hands-on drill, I would say if you find yourself overwhelmed, take 2 deep breaths to center yourself, and then go through the triage mantra. You know, RPMs was what we were using at that time. 32 can do is also the mantra one can use, whatever it is, to get you centered and then focused in on what are you actually doing. And guaranteed, and I've taught police and I've taught firefighters. And the question I always ask, what is it that gets you? And almost always they would say a child.
Mm-hmm.
And if they were dealing with a child, they may need the buddy, because we always go in buddy teams to, you know, whap them on the back or say, you know, I'll take the lead or whatever, as you were describing, and have your partner take over. And that's a wonderful thing. That's why it's so important to make sure you have a partner, you don't do it alone, and you try and just center yourself.
Yeah, and absolutely, it's about knowing yourself, but willing to say, I am having a problem here. I need to step back. Can you step up and take over? And if you're not willing to do that, then you need to question your motives because it's not about you. It's about patient outcome. It's making sure that you're helping someone, even if you're not the best person to help them. You don't want to be the reason why, because if your ego, that this person doesn't survive or doesn't get the best care. But I want to reemphasize that breathing part. A lot of times when we're in a situation where we're overwhelmed, we stop breathing. And that's the worst thing that can happen, because your brain needs oxygen. And if you stop breathing, you're completely frozen. Your brain actually starts to starve itself, and it gets worse from there. You could black out. So focus on your breathing. Try and push everything away. Close your eyes. Start taking deep, full breaths. Focus on that. And there's a lot of different techniques, box breathing, just deep, full breaths, whatever it takes to center yourself, bring yourself back into the moment, and then hopefully rejoin. But if you can't, remember, it's you don't want to be the reason that someone else has a problem, and you don't want to put yourself at risk. If you're not able to cope with the stress of whatever you just saw, you could actually cause yourself harm. And that's even worse, because now you can't help anybody if you've taken yourself out for whatever reason. You've caused yourself respiratory distress or had a panic attack or something, and you let it go and get worse. Thank you for bringing that. I missed that in the chat. So thank you for bringing that up, and hopefully that answers your question, Georgia. Any other questions or anything else before we let you go?
I just have one comment.
Yeah, Annalise.
This is like super timely because I'm supposed to be writing an article for our local newsletter on basically asking questions for cybersecurity and how to identify social hacking.
Mm,
So you're giving me things to think about. So thank you.
yeah. And the big thing there, well, it used to be that people would intentionally have typos and make errors and make it seem very obvious that this is a scam because they want to scare people off and they want to get the dumb ones who don't question anything. With AI, I think we're seeing a turn now where things are super hyper real, and it is almost impossible to know whether or not something is legit or a scam. And so everything is evolving and becoming very scary, to the point where you might get a phone call from someone that you know, a loved one. They managed to capture some voice and created artificial clone of their voice. This is where questioning things becomes very critical, because AI can't yet turn on a dime. If you challenge it, you might be able to confuse it. And if you have any kind of suspicion, and even, something doesn't seem right here. You're talking to someone and the cadence is off. There's weird pauses. It doesn't sound like them, but it sounds like them. Something doesn't seem right. Throw some manipulation in there. What's our passphrase? Well, if you've never actually set up a passphrase with a loved one and they come up with something weird, then you definitely have a problem. Um, you know, so this is why you need to really ask those questions.
Yeah.
Scary.
An associate of our group fell for there's something wrong with your computer, call this number.
Mm.
And my understanding is she did ask enough to kind of look at the number, but it seemed legit, so she called it. And everyone else is going, don't do that. But the thing I'm having trouble trying to figure out how to explain is, if you don't know, how do you know?
Yeah.
Like, and I know that if that pops up, that's a scam. But if you've never heard of that, there's that sort of, like you're saying, if something just seems off, then you need to go, call a friend to ask them. My mom does it all the time, that she's like, something feels off about this. Like, I can't figure out what it is. What is it? And I go look at it. I'm like, okay, no, this is legit. That one, they're trying to point you to a URL that's not who it says it is. And
Yeah.
she's like, okay. But I guess that's the big thing, is that if something doesn't quite seem completely legit, go get backup.
Yeah. And someone earlier mentioned that you got 7 phishing attempts today.
Yeah.
I've also seen a marked increase today alone of weird random text messages. Hey, call me. Or hey, it's your friend from primary school. We want to talk about our reunion. Don't respond. If it is legitimately a friend, they should know who you are. They are being vague intentionally.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to get you to respond emotionally to something that you should know better, or you should at least start to question. And if someone, if someone is a friend and they reach out to you and they say, "Hey, buddy, it's me," and you don't respond to them, they should know better than to do something that broad. But even the banks, I had to call in to my bank, and they say right on the website, right in the message, we will never send you a text for fraud alert to verify. But we're sending you a text as you're calling in to verify your identity. Please enter the code that we just texted you. It's like, you just told me you're not going to do that, and you do it. I don't even know what to believe at this point.
Yeah.
It is very complicated and very dangerous, and consistency is not there, and people are just being dumb about things, and it is definitely in the favor of people who are trying to do you wrong. That everything is confusing, and they'll double down on that. They'll try and make it even more confusing just to push you over the edge, and so you give up and give in to them.
Yeah.
DL was asking about a movie where older people were the target. Lady in the movie was an account holder of multiple business accounts, and they emptied her out. It was called The Beekeeper.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. I had my reservations about that movie, and still do. It was a great action flick. I'm glad it ended the way it did, but these, generally speaking, people who are trying to manipulate you were coming from outside the country, but we've been conditioned to deal with customer support from India, Philippines, South Africa, wherever. So we're not even questioning that anymore. But certainly the IRS will never tell you to send them a gift card. And
Facts.
you will never be
Or
told to
LAPD.
buy
You're back for
Bitcoin.
a card.
Sorry, what was that, Annalisa?
Oh, I've been at LAPD Harbor Station where somebody came in and was like, I've got this guy saying he's from LAPD and he wants gift cards, and they're going, no,
Yeah.
we would never do that.
And the thing is that it is trivial to spoof a number. So you might get a call from LAPD Harbor Division, and it comes up as caller ID and shows you their number. Hang up, call them back. But call a legit number. Go to their website and actually check it and call it, because it may look like it's coming from that number, but when you call the real number, it may look like it's the number on the back of your debit card. But when you hang up and you really call the number that's on the back of your debit card, well, Bank of America was like, no, that sounds like a scam. No, it was really real. It was really them. But again, the consistency and the confusion, it's all bad. Daryl's saying the New Yorker magazine had a story about 5 years ago about a cyber expert who was scammed for a bunch of money. It ended with him saying that he really still believed the person needed money. Manipulation, especially when they get emotions involved. I mean, how many people remember the commercial of Sad Dogs with Sarah McLachlan singing, and they wanted you to call and give them money. Yeah, it's life is a manipulation. Just you got to be understanding about the motives that people have, and it's scary out there, no doubt. All right, one last time, any other questions, comments, editorials, stories, things they want to share about, whatever. Otherwise, thank you, everyone. Have a good night. I hope to see you at the upcoming drills, and hope to see you back at our next training.
Thank you,
Okay.
Patrick.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the training.
Thank you.
Bye and thanks.
All right.